We're here at Lindisfarne. If you've been following us across the last few years, you'll know that we found a series of namestones from the excavations, which are really exciting. Before we came here, we knew namestones existed. In total, there's around 40 that have been found. They're very much associated with the northeast, and 9 of them have come from our excavations in Lindisfarne, which make the total that have come from Holy Island around 30. Rather than me telling you all about them and just making stuff up as I do, we've invited Christina, who's an expert. She's doing a PhD at the University of Durham, and she's been helping us find out exactly what we need to know about these namestones. Welcome to the Finds Room, Christina.
Thanks for having me here, Manda.
That's no problem. I'm looking forward to learning a bit more about the namestones. So, do you want to introduce one of them and tell me all about it?
So I've chosen 5 of them because they each tell us something a bit different about form. So this first one was found in our first season of excavation in 2016. It has the beautiful quintessential curved top of the Holy Island namestones, and it's significant because it has a previously unattested Old English name. You can see Ithfrith, which is a name that was unknown before this namestone was found. It's also a significant piece because it has this recessed circular area, and what's significant about that is that it probably held some sort of inset, so maybe metal or glass, and that would have contributed to the multimedia nature of these monuments, in addition to the fact which they might have been painted.
So that curved form, so you're talking about a semicircle, basically, that would stand up, and rather than the stone that we just see here at the moment, they might have been painted.
Yes.
They might have had kind of glitzy, sparkly things attached to them, maybe.
Indeed, in the case of this one, yeah. So in some ways, as we'll see further on, they're like little manuscript folia.
Where should we move to next?
I think the next fragment we'll move to is this one, which has a beautifully intricate interlaced border. So whilst on the previous fragment, we saw a simple incised line, this one has a very detailed interlace pattern, and then the beginning of another inscription.
And this really reminds me of some of those pages out of Gospels that we see. Is that the impression that we're trying to get?
Certainly, and certainly Lindisfarne was a place of important manuscript production. And this particular fragment bears resemblance to a regula of St. Benedict from Tegernsee, a manuscript in the 8th century. So again, another nice chronological counterpoint for these monuments.
So do you think the people that were sculpting the stones were very much aware of those manuscripts?
Certainly.
Yeah. So what we've seen from these 2 examples so far is that we've got this curved top to the stones. And we've got a couple of examples that show us the base.
Yes, we do. This one was found in the same year as that interlaced fragment. So we see the bottom. This is the cross base, the stem of the cross. And then this would have been the cross shaft coming up. Then you would have had the arm terminals of the cross and then the cross head. And we see again another inscription, which we'll have to have our specialist identify for us.
Within the stones that we've got here, you've mentioned the names themselves. Do all of them have the cross?
Yes.
On the face as well?
A couple of the Holy Island ones don't. All the ones that we found in excavation do. And the inscription is on either side. It goes between the cross form. So again, it's the focus on the name, and a name which is very much intertwined with that central cross.
So that brings us up, I think, to the more recent examples that we've got.
It does, and these 2 fragments just came out of the trenches last week, which was very exciting. I think the one that we'll show first is this fragment, which is one of only 2 that come from Holy Island that's actually carved on both sides.
Wow.
And so the question then becomes, is this 2 different periods of use? Was it reuse of a namestone and then someone wanting to add, a second face to the namestone? Because I should say all the others are carved on only one face. And there appears to be a runic inscription in lightly incised lines on this face. And on the other side, we have a portion of an Old English name in bookhand.
And is that something that occurs across different mediums, or is that something that you see on other namestones?
We do see it on other namestones in our assemblage here. And you see it on other sculpture forms at times, but it's special. Even though there are occurrences, it's not terribly frequent.
The stones that we've had over the years have come a lot from our archaeological contexts, which are all mixed up. They've been ploughed, a lime kiln's been driven through the whole site. We've got a number of burials that are all intercutting. So what we haven't found is this beautiful archaeological example of a grave with namestone in place. But obviously we find them and we say, oh, this is early medieval or this is 9th century. So is this collection all of the same kind of date?
On epigraphic grounds, these monuments are usually dated to the first quarter, first half of the 8th century. We can date based off of letter form, so comparison with manuscripts that have similar letter form. Or we can date off of the use of a certain name. Again, manuscripts. We can also date based off a stylistic comparison, so comparing these monuments to a page in a folio of a manuscript, as I mentioned before. But we can't date them at present based on their archaeological context because of that disturbed, rubbly layer that most of them have been found in.
But the reason that this one's exciting is because actually this has got a kind of a better archaeological context. Is that right?
Yes. This fragment, which is quite hefty, it's definitely, as you can see, the thickest of the namestones we found in excavation and the most complete in our excavations, at least. And it's significant, as Manda was alluding to, because it was found in proximity to what we're calling the focal burial in one of the trenches. So it was kind of almost falling into that burial. So whilst we can't associate it with that individual specifically, clearly there is activity going on in the grave around it of people wanting to be buried near to that person.
One of the other things that's interesting about the two more recent ones is that we haven't cleaned them. And do you want to tell us a little bit about why that might be?
So this fragment and the other one that was just found will be sent to Durham University, where we have individuals working on pigment. So pigment can not only tell us about what colors obviously were used, how these little objects would have looked, but also the material that went into making them and perhaps where those pigments came from.
So we can learn so much more than
Certainly.
just about the stone itself, but also about the technology that was used and the artisans that might have been using it, perhaps?
Certainly, yeah, and how that relates as well to other monumental sculpture forms, because we do know that other stone monuments were painted quite dynamically.
Do you think they would have been visible or associated with a particular grave, or like what's your feeling?
It's a really good question, Manda. There's a lot of discussions going on at the moment as to the function of these monuments. Are they some sort of grave marker within that burial context? They are found in burial context, but not in situ. So then the question becomes, based on the fact that they're quite unworn, if a monument like this had spent any time out of doors for an extended period of time, we wouldn't have the preservation of the inscriptions, meaning that they might have been interred with the individual, thus explaining why the inscriptions have weathered so little. Another idea is that perhaps they had a function in the role of the living, and that they could have been carried to and from the grave, perhaps as part of liturgical procession, but that's all up for debate. And when we find a namestone in situ, that will be a brilliant moment, and we're getting closer. We're getting closer.
Yeah. So the way that we think about grave markers and gravestones, and we talk in that way because that's how we do things today. These could be much more personal objects, and they might have been quite portable. They might have been outside a grave, showing that something's there, or they might not have been visible at all to the people visiting the site.
Right. And the power of that too is that they fossilize in stone a prayer for that person. And perhaps as well, others would want to be buried by an individual who's associated with a namestone. Because the point is we don't find many of them. We have a lot more burials than we do namestones. So clearly these are important individuals who others would want to be interred perhaps next to, or if there's familial connections as well.
So basically, our group, or what we've added from the excavations, is context.
Yes.
Especially for Lindisfarne. And that kind of adds into the story of the whole island, the dating that we've got from the site itself and from the burials that we've got. And it ties in with some of those other objects and everyday items. It kind of is very much associated with the burials that we've got.
And it humanizes as well our studies when we get those individual names. And in particular, some of the namestones have female names, which is quite significant in that larger corpus of the people that we're learning about.
So what's your favourite thing about namestones?
I think my favorite thing about the namestones is the personal nature of them. There's something very intimate about seeing an individual's name, and we're getting to witness that in the context of our excavations. I think that's probably my favorite thing about them.
Thank you so much for your time and your knowledge. That's been so interesting.
Thank you for having me here, Manda.